3:17 local time. The Black Sea looks calm tonight, no visible swell, no storms rolling in from the west. Wind speed is low, just enough to ripple the surface without breaking it. From a purely nautical perspective, these are ideal conditions. Clear visibility, stable sensor performance, minimal environmental noise. And historically, this is exactly the kind of night when fleets move. Geographically, we are operating in one of the most sensitive maritime zones on the planet. The Black Sea is not just a body of water, it is a corridor of power, trade, and deterrence. NATO territory presses in from the west. Russian-occupied Crimea dominates the north. Commercial shipping lanes cut through the middle, carrying grain, fuel, and money, quietly sustaining economies that pretend not to notice the war. On paper, this sea was supposed to belong to Russia. The Black Sea Fleet, headquartered in Sevastopol, was designed to project power across this entire basin. Missile corvettes, frigates, submarines armed with caliber cruise missiles. A fleet meant not merely to exist, but to intimidate. Yet tonight, something is missing. There are no Russian surface combatants maneuvering freely, no patrol patterns extending deep into open water, no confident naval presence asserting control over the sea that literally bears the fleet's name. Instead, the decisive tool-shaping events out here isn't a cruiser, a submarine, or an aircraft carrier. It's a drone. Specifically, unmanned surface vehicles, USVs, small, fast, expendable platforms skimming just above the waterline, carrying explosive payloads and operating far beyond what traditional naval doctrine ever planned for. Ukraine does not have a navy in the classical sense. No destroyers, no frigates, no carriers. By conventional metrics, it never should have contested this maritime space at all. And yet, this is where we are. Because modern naval warfare is no longer defined solely by tonnage, hull count, or flag presence. It's defined by who controls movement and who makes movement lethal. Tonight's objective is not dominance, it's denial. The systematic removal of freedom of action. The quiet enforcement of a single rule that governs the Black Sea now. If a Russian warship leaves port, it does so at its own risk, and increasingly, that risk is fatal. To understand why the Black Sea Fleet behaves the way it does today, you first have to understand what it's actually afraid of. Not missiles, not aircraft, not submarines. It's afraid of something much smaller, much cheaper, and far more inconvenient. Ukraine's unmanned surface vehicles are dangerous not because they represent a technological miracle, but because they exploit every weakness built into traditional naval warfare. These drones operate low, sometimes barely above the waterline, where radar performance degrades and visual detection becomes unreliable, especially at night or in marginal weather. Surface search radars on warships were never optimized to hunt objects the size of a personal watercraft, moving at high speed with minimal profile. Detection ranges shrink, reaction windows collapse. By the time a crew realizes what it's looking at, the geometry is already wrong. Speed compounds the problem. Many Ukrainian USVs are capable of sustained high-speed runs exceeding 40 knots. That may not sound extraordinary until you consider that this speed is delivered without a human on board, without concern for survivability, and without the need to return. Then there's payload. These are not harassment tools. They carry warheads large enough to cripple or sink frigate-class vessels. And unlike cruise missiles, they don't announce their arrival with launch signatures, plume detection, or early warning cues. They arrive quietly, relentlessly, at sea level. Control is the final piece of the puzzle. Ukrainian operators manage these drones from compact, portable consoles. Systems roughly the size of a suitcase, equipped with multi-screen displays, joystick controls, encrypted data links, and layered security protocols. It's closer to piloting than firing, closer to stalking than striking. And here's the part naval planners tend to hate. Every exchange favors Ukraine economically. A drone costs a fraction of the ship it threatens. A failed intercept still costs Russia ammunition, crew fatigue, and morale. A successful strike costs Moscow something it can't easily replace, a modern warship, or at the very least, confidence in its fleet's ability to survive outside port. Russia, notably, has not fielded effective countermeasures. No new sensor suites optimized for small surface threats, no widespread deployment of close-in defensive systems tailored to USVs, no doctrinal adaptation that restores freedom of movement. Instead, the adaptation has been psychological. Don't go far, don't stay long, don't linger. It's not exactly the kind of maritime dominance that looks impressive on a map, but it does explain why the Black Sea has started to feel very small to a fleet that once expected to own it. Most of naval warfare is not action. It's waiting. Hours stretch into shifts. Shifts blur into days. Operators stare at screens that rarely change. Sensor feeds scroll quietly. Coordinates update by fractions. Nothing happens until it does. This is the rhythm Ukraine has learned to master in the Black Sea. Its drone operators don't hunt the way fighter pilots do. They observe, they catalog, they memorize routines. Which ports see activity? Which time windows repeat? How long a ship remains visible before retreating? How quickly Russian crews react to perceived threats? Patterns form, and patterns become vulnerabilities. On the Russian side, the calm is heavier. Warships remain docked, engines idle. Crews drill, wait, and rehearse contingencies they hope not to execute. When orders come to sail, they are brief, limited, and precise. Launch missiles. Turn around. Return to safety. No loitering. No patrols. No improvisation. It's a form of naval paralysis that doesn't show up on order of battle charts, but it shows up everywhere else. In morale, in readiness, and in the quiet calculations every commander makes before moving steel into open water. There's a line often attributed to modern soldiers. War is 99% boredom and 1% adrenaline. In the Black Sea, Ukraine owns the boredom. It controls the tempo of waiting. It decides when nothing happens and when everything does. For days, sometimes weeks, there are no strikes, no explosions, no headlines. Observers mistake this for restraint or worse, exhaustion. In reality, it's conditioning. Teaching the enemy that stillness is survival and movement is punishment, and that lesson sticks, because the absence of action doesn't mean the absence of pressure. It means the pressure has become constant, ambient, unavoidable. Every radar contact becomes suspicious. Every sensor anomaly demands attention. Every decision to sail carries the same unspoken question. Is tonight the night? This is where modern warfare becomes psychological long before it becomes physical. Before any drone is launched, before any explosion breaks the surface, the battle is already underway, quietly shaping behavior, compressing options, and narrowing the space in which the Black Sea Fleet can safely exist. And then, inevitably, something changes. A deviation, a signal, a movement that doesn't fit the pattern. That's when the calm ends. The first sign is never dramatic. It's not an explosion, not a warning shot, not even a confirmed target. It's a discrepancy. A faint return appears where the sea should be empty. The contact is intermittent, unstable, too slow to be a wave, too persistent to be noise. On the surface search feed, it drifts just outside what has become the Russian fleet's self-imposed comfort zone. Zoom in. The optical feed sharpens, pixel by pixel. Low contrast, poor lighting. A shape begins to separate itself from the water. Long, rigid, purposeful. This alone would be enough to trigger scrutiny. But then comes the detail that matters. The contact is moving away from port, not toward it. That's unusual. Russian surface combatants have learned to limit their exposure. They rarely sail far. They don't linger. When they do appear, it's usually for one reason, missile launch, and they retreat almost immediately afterward. This movement doesn't fit that pattern. Operators cross-check the signal. AIS data shows nothing. Civilian traffic in the area has already been logged and cleared. The silhouette doesn't match a tanker, a fishing vessel, or any of the shadow fleet hulls that now clutter these waters. Magnification increases again. Deck geometry becomes visible. Superstructure lines confirm what everyone already suspects but doesn't say out loud yet. This is military, and it's behaving differently than expected. The feed freezes briefly as the system compensates for signal loss. When it stabilizes, the vessel has altered course, slightly but deliberately. That adjustment is what seals it. Civilian ships don't maneuver like that. Automated traffic doesn't think. Someone on board is reacting to something, even if they don't know exactly what. At this point, the room goes quiet. Not because of fear, because of calculation. This isn't just a target, it's a deviation. A test, perhaps, or a mistake. Either way, it represents an opportunity and a risk. If this is bait, striking too early reveals tactics. If it's genuine, letting it escape reinforces the enemy's belief that movement is once again possible. This is the moment modern warfare often hinges on. Not at the point of impact, but here, in the analysis of something that doesn't belong. Because anomalies are rarely accidental. They're either the beginning of adaptation or the prelude to punishment, and the next decision will determine which one it becomes. At this stage, the most dangerous thing to do is assume. Every contact has a context, and this one refuses to fit neatly into any of them. Under normal circumstances, a Russian surface combatant venturing this far from port would signal one of two things: confidence or desperation. Neither explanation sits comfortably with recent behavior. The fleet has spent months minimizing exposure, launching missiles from the edge of safety, then retreating before Ukraine's drones can react. This movement suggests something different. Analysts begin running comparisons. Speed, heading, time of day, historical patterns. Nothing lines up cleanly. The vessel isn't sprinting, which rules out a quick strike and withdraw profile. It isn't loitering either, which would imply escort duty or area denial. So why is it here? One possibility is adaptation, a test of new procedures. Perhaps additional defenses have been installed. Counter-drone systems, improved sensors, electronic warfare suites meant to detect or disrupt Ukrainian USVs earlier than before. If that's the case, engaging now carries risk. A failed strike would provide Russia with something it desperately needs: proof that its ships can operate farther from port without consequence. Another possibility is deception. Navies have used decoys for as long as navies have existed. An expendable vessel, a modified hull, or even a manned ship operating under false assumptions could be intended to draw out Ukrainian tactics, revealing drone routes, control links, or response times. Then there's the simplest explanation: human error. A commander misjudges the threat. A schedule slips. A ship stays out too long. Complacency sets in after weeks of quiet. History suggests this is often the most likely cause. But modern warfare punishes those who guess wrong. The assessment phase is where Ukraine's advantage truly shows. Without crews on board, without capital assets at stake, Ukrainian planners can afford to be patient. They don't need to prove dominance. They only need to preserve denial. Every second the ship remains exposed increases its risk. Every minute of observation improves the quality of the strike, if a strike comes at all. And here's the quiet truth that hangs over the room. Russia cannot afford to lose another major surface vessel in the Black Sea. Politically, operationally, symbolically. Each loss further reduces an already constrained fleet and reinforces the narrative that the sea is no longer navigable under Russian control. So the question becomes less about capability and more about intent. Is the ship testing the boundary, or has it already crossed it? Because once that line is crossed, hesitation no longer serves restraint. It serves the enemy. And that is when analysis ends and decisions begin. Decisions in modern warfare rarely arrive with certainty. They arrive with timers. The contact remains on screen, still outside the envelope where Russian ships usually feel safe. Its course is steady now, almost deliberate. Whatever this is, test, mistake, or gamble, it hasn't turned back. That alone narrows the options. Operators elevate the assessment. Command channels open. No raised voices, no urgency in tone, just facts, relayed precisely. Coordinates, speed, classification confidence, time on station. The request is simple: permission to engage. But the decision is not. Authorization carries weight. A strike confirms that Ukraine is willing to enforce the boundary again, not just observe it. It also risks exposure, revealing response times, drone launch vectors, and control methods that Russia would very much like to understand. Delay carries its own cost. Every minute the ship remains unchallenged is a data point for the other side. A successful excursion, even a brief one, reshapes behavior. It suggests the sea may no longer be as hostile as believed. There is also the question of escalation. A strike here will not change the war overnight. It won't alter front lines or force negotiations, but it will reinforce a pattern. One Russia has been trying unsuccessfully to break. Command weighs the trade-offs quickly. This is not the early phase of the war, where dramatic losses defined narratives. This is the long phase, the one where maintaining pressure matters more than headlines. Then friction appears. The drone feed flickers. Data latency spikes momentarily. A reminder that even the most advanced systems depend on fragile links, satellites, relays, software behaving as expected. A brief pause follows. Not hesitation, calibration. Alternate drones are checked, Redundancy confirmed. The target is still there. The order comes back without ceremony. Proceed, no speeches, no countdown yet, just a shift in posture. The kind operators recognize instantly. Hands settle, voices drop another register. From this point on, the engagement is no longer hypothetical. The decision has already altered the battle space. The ship's fate is now bound not to its weapons, its armor, or its flag, but to whether it can outrun a system designed to be faster, cheaper, and expendable. And it won't get a warning. Because at sea, once the decision is made, the distance between choice and consequence collapses very quickly. The timeline compresses. What took hours of observation now unfolds in seconds. The drone accelerates. On the feed, the sea flattens into motion blur. Spray flicks across the lens, momentarily obscuring the image before the stabilization software corrects it. The target grows larger, frame by frame. Its outline sharpens. Hull number partially visible. Superstructure unmistakable. No alarms sound in the control room. None are needed. Range closes. 10 seconds. The ship still hasn't changed course. 5. The drone's perspective is low, almost at water level, where waves look larger than they are and metal looks unforgiving. Defensive systems on the ship remain quiet. No gunfire, no last-second maneuver. Either the crew hasn't seen it or they've seen it too late. 3, 2, impact. The screen flashes white, then orange. The feed jolts violently as the warhead detonates against the hull. Fire blooms outward, contained at first, then spreading as fuel and exposed systems ignite. The image fragments into static before cutting completely. Silence. No cheering, no reaction shots, just confirmation codes scrolling quietly across secondary displays. Hit confirmed. For a moment, nothing else happens. No secondary explosions visible, no immediate sinking. That's normal. Ships are resilient until they aren't. What matters is not spectacle. What matters is effect. The drone is gone. The target is damaged, and the message has already been delivered. Somewhere out there, alarms are now sounding. Damage control teams are scrambling. Orders are being shouted down passageways that were quiet seconds ago. The ship's mission, whatever it was, is over, and just as quickly as it began, the moment ends. The sea absorbs the rest, because in modern naval warfare, execution is brief by design. The violence is concentrated, the exposure minimal, the risk asymmetric. The lesson, however, lasts much longer. The aftermath is never loud. There are no victory messages transmitted over open channels, no dramatic footage replayed in slow motion. The drone feed is already gone, archived as data, reduced to timestamps and coordinates. But the effects ripple outward almost immediately. The damaged vessel does not resume its mission. It does not linger. Whether it limps back under its own power or requires escort is ultimately irrelevant. What matters is that it retreats. Again. Just like the others before it. And with that retreat, the pattern holds. Russian surface combatants remain constrained to the narrow corridors near their ports. Launch windows stay brief. Exposure stays minimal. The Black Sea Fleet continues to exist, but largely in theory, not in practice. This is the larger truth that tends to get lost in discussions about individual strikes. Ukraine is not trying to destroy every Russian warship. It doesn't need to. The strategic objective is far simpler and far more efficient. Deny freedom of movement. A fleet that cannot maneuver cannot dominate. A fleet that cannot dominate cannot enforce blockades, protect commercial routes, or project power beyond its shoreline. It becomes reactive, defensive, expensive. And expensive is the key word. Maintaining a modern fleet that rarely sails is a financial drain with diminishing returns. Crews still require training, ships still require maintenance, missiles still need to be stockpiled. All of it consumes resources while delivering less and less strategic value. Meanwhile, Ukraine's drones continue to evolve. Longer range, heavier payloads, greater autonomy, increasing reliance on artificial intelligence to assist with target identification and navigation. Systems that do not get tired, do not panic, and do not hesitate. The Black Sea, once assumed to be a closed Russian lake after the annexation of Crimea, has become a hostile environment for the very fleet meant to control it, and the implications extend beyond warships. With major naval assets neutralized, Ukraine has begun shifting attention to softer but strategically critical targets. Russia's shadow fleet, aging tankers, Sanction-evading vessels. Floating revenue streams that quietly fund the war effort. Recent strikes against these ships would not be possible if the Black Sea Fleet were functioning as intended. They happen precisely because it isn't. Russia's leadership has responded with threats, talk of blockades, escalation, cutting Ukraine off from the sea entirely. But threats require credibility, and credibility at sea requires ships willing to sail. Right now, they aren't. That is the revelation. Not that Ukraine has won the Black Sea outright, but that it has changed the rules so completely that traditional naval power no longer guarantees control. In this war, the Black Sea is not owned by the largest fleet. It is owned by the side that makes movement too costly to attempt. And for now, that balance remains firmly and quietly in Ukraine's favor.